Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of boards, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another Roll20 review, my written and video review series, where I take a look at the marketplace section of online role-playing website Roll20.net. With this video, I'll be reviewing the Starter Box Pathfinder 2nd Edition Beginner Box, published by Paizo and adapted for Roll20. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider supporting me via patreon.com/RogueWatson. So I'm finally putting my money where my mouth is, so to speak, and looking at other RPG rule systems besides D&D 5e, which is primarily what I've been running and covering here on my YouTube channel. Fun fact, I do have some history with Pathfinder. I actually kind of started my modern adult tabletop RPG hobby with Pathfinder, Pathfinder 1st Edition, back before 5e was a thing. I believe it was like 2014. And then 5e came up. First, we went to Shadowrun for a little bit and flirted with Shadowrun 5th Edition. And then D&D 5th Edition was coming out, and we jumped on that to see what it was all about because it got a lot of good buzz. And kind of the rest is history. We've been playing 5e ever since. But now we've just had a full month, which is January 2023, of this whole OGL drama that I'm not going to spend this video review going into, but clearly has motivated, I would say, a lot of us to maybe think outside of the ampersand and explore some of the other options that are out there. And since I cover a lot of stuff on Roll20, that's the virtual tabletop system that I've used for years and years, there are, of course, many options available now. And Pathfinder is still, one of the biggest alternate options if you like the D&D genre, specifically like a heroic fantasy, swords and sorcery, high fantasy rules system, but you don't necessarily want to be in the D&D ecosystem. Then I think Pathfinder is probably going to be the biggest elephant in the room to cover. So it was first come about in, I believe, like 09 or 10 or somewhere around 4th edition. I'm not going to go through a big history blurb, by the way. I'm going to jump into this beginner box pretty quickly, but I wanted to mention the fact that 2nd edition has been out for a couple years now. But only, I think, recently has been available on Roll20 and has been given a lot of the support that has come with 5th edition as well. So for this purpose of this review, I'm going to be covering the beginner box, the adventure, how I feel about how it teaches Pathfinder, how the adventure works, what kind of content you get in the beginner box, and then I'm also going to be, because it's a Roll20 review, talking about how that stuff looks on Roll20, and if you basically either recommend or don't recommend that you actually get this on Roll20 Marketplace as opposed to maybe a physical product. Obviously, whether you're playing digitally or not is going to be the biggest factor for you. So what all do you actually get with the Pathfinder 2nd Edition box? It's still called the Beginner Box, even though on Roll20 it's clearly just a bundle of digital products that you're getting. You get the Pathfinder 2e Compendium, the Player Token Back, and the Adventure, which is called A Menace Under Otari. So the Adventure, actually we'll talk about the Compendium first. The Compendium includes basically any just written content that is included in the box, which would be a 72-page Heroes Handbook and the 88-page Game Master's Handbook. Now, somewhat annoyingly, they actually put the Adventure first and then the rulebook stuff after all of that. So if we scroll down in the journal, which, by the way, this is what is going to appear if you actually just make a game based on the beginner box. The compendium means it's just included here in this actual tab, which means you have this information in all of your games. It persists across all of your Roll20 games, which includes any magic items, creatures, character building information, which there's only 4 classes included in the beginner box and only up to level 3, but all of the information will be included here in the compendium, and then you can drag and drop stuff like monsters you can drag from here into your maps, or any kind of spells or items you can drag and drop into the character sheets, and it will populate it. So that part's pretty nice, but it is included in the journal as well, which the journal being the actual adventure part. So you have to scroll all the way down here to the actual beginner box Game Master's Guide, and then the Heroes Handbook and Quick Rules, to where you basically get the proper rules sheet. And it's kind of one big handout here, which they probably could have broken this up a little bit to make it a little bit easier reading, but it's also available in the compendium, which would probably be ultimately the better way of looking at that information. I do like the artwork for Pathfinder. It is different, and I know it can be kind of divisive for a lot of people. Particularly like the way they do elves. Elves look more alien-ish than a lot of elves do in fantasy, which I appreciate. But I would say the Pathfinder art can be kind of an acquired taste. You know, at first it might be kind of like, whoa, everybody looks kind of weird and different and more, I don't know, exaggerated in a way that's not like the typical like Warcraft fantasy way, and not the typical like high fantasy, you know, Larry Elmore inspired artwork that we might see. But I appreciate that it's different while still being firmly in that genre. We get a lot of player art handouts that are included. So that's all the information. Oh, and then the handbook also includes an entire solo adventure, which I was confused about this at first till I read about it. It's literally like a choose your own adventure, designed to teach like one player how to play, including you, the game master, can just flip through and make these little decisions and roll things. And basically, it's literally like, I don't know if maybe folks who are my age and older recall going to the library and actually checking out like the old, like, I think they were called Fighting Fantasy. I know there's a whole literal choose your own adventure, but they were like they were fantasy versions of that, were like D&D in a book, and you would read the book and you'd even take like certain classes at the beginning, and then if you had those classes available, you'd like turn to page this, turn to page that, and it was like basically solo adventures. That's exactly what this is. So it's cute. It's weird looking in Roll20 because it's just the pages are just a bunch of handouts. I'm not sure how else they could have done it and have it make sense, and the hyperlinks do work where you can click on them and they'll pop up. Other than maybe attaching some artwork to it would have been really nice to have. So it's kind of awkwardly placed in Roll20, but that's what that solo adventure means. The player token art pack, by the way, is included in this art gallery section. To find it, it's actually under beginner box player token pack. Obviously, if you only have a few of these, it doesn't matter. As you can see by my scroll bar, I have quite a number of them. And these will include over 30 tokens and handouts that are from the beginner box. Roll20 has actually cropped a lot of the NPC or PC art that you could use, mainly pictures of dwarves, elves, and humans, and turned those into ready-to-go tokens. In case you didn't want to use any of the starter characters, you want to use your own artwork, you can actually use all of this, and each one of these comes with extra handouts you can use too. So this is a pretty usual, normal thing they include with all of the bundles you can purchase. They'll include these token art packs. This one is one of the smaller ones, but the beginner box also is very limited on what content you're going to get, so I didn't expect to have too much in there. But it really shows off, I think, the Pathfinder art really, really well, and gives you a lot more options versus just those pre-generated characters, which are included under the adventure, which is Menace under Otari. Now, ultimately, the beginner box, I feel like, is kind of a mixed bag. I think it does a lot of things really well, but one of the things it's really lacking in is the included adventure is kind of short. In fact, it's really short. It's tiny. It's one dungeon crawl. Now, the dungeon crawl is really well designed. I really enjoyed it. It's got some awesome artwork. It's got just a balance of content and just really shows off dungeon crawling, which is what Pathfinder and D&D do well. Like, those systems work best when you're dungeon crawling. Unfortunately, that's all it is. It's just a single dungeon, which is like if Lost Mine of Fendelver was just the Wave Echo Cave dungeon, or the Trezendar Manor dungeon, or the cave, the Goblin Cave dungeon. But you see what I'm saying? Like, Lost Mine of Fendelver comes with multiple dungeon crawls, includes characters from levels 1 through 4. You have a hub town. You go around to different areas and subquests. This is just a single dungeon crawl that takes place underneath a town. And the town, yes, we do get information on the town. It's fleshed out in its own little section, but you don't really interact with the town right here in the course of the adventure. So it's just kind of for GMs to be able to check it out and see who are the major players and locations and maybe some adventure ideas. But otherwise, that's not what the adventure is. It is literally just a dungeon crawl, which is really disappointingly short, especially for me, somebody coming from 5e who's used to having a lot more content in those starter sets, such as Lost Mine of Fendelver, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, and Dragons of Icespire Keep, which I think is called the Essentials Kit. Peak, sorry. Those have a lot more content and really feel like they are mini adventures versus this one, which is, frankly, I think even calling an adventure is stretching a little bit far. It really is just a dungeon crawl. But the dungeon crawl is really, really well done, and I'm going to show that to you as well. So we do get information here about how to build your characters, but you're designed to play these 4 pre-generated characters, which have their own character sheets, tokens, all that good stuff. And my goodness, do I love how these character sheets look. So just to wrap up what the adventure gives you, a level 1 to 2 dungeon crawl, 2 5-foot scale battle maps, 1 non-gridded regional map of Otari, which you can see up here, and I will show these maps to you. In fact, we can look at them right now. There's the map of Otari. Very nice, very lovely. You don't really need to use this map for much because the adventure takes place all pretty much underneath Otari, but it's there. And then I'll show you these. These are flip mats, by the way, is what Pathfinder calls them, which are large in the physical box, large mats that have double-sided, and you can use both sides of them. And they'd come with a bunch of little, pawns that you can use for your in place of minis, which I think work perfectly fine. But in Roll20, we've got these nice tokens. Has really become the de facto, I think, for representing characters and monsters, and I think they look fantastic. It also includes over 50 creature stat blocks with tokens and player handouts, which I was very impressed with. And again, this is the beginner box, just including all these extra creatures, which is really, really handy to have. And that allows you to expand beyond the realm of this one little adventure, because this adventure only uses the ones listed here under creatures and adventure, which are 11 of them. Those are all the ones that are included in this little 2-level dungeon, which is a lot, by the way, for one dungeon. It is a big, cool dungeon with a lot of stuff in there. However, we get another 40 creatures listed in here, which is freaking awesome. So hats off to them for including a lot of extra creatures. I wish we had more adventure to use those creatures in, but that's obviously up to you, the game master, to use them. We also get over 40 magic item handouts, 13 of which have art, which are included over here. And then 25 player art handouts, which is not including all of the creature tokens you see, because they all include player art handouts. For example, if you wanted to, let's grab, I'm going to shift double click this Kobold Warrior, which pulls up the character sheet. And this is what me, the GM, sees. I can click this hyperlink Kobold Warrior, and then I can click show to players. And then that actually shows this artwork off to your players without showing them anything in the character sheet, or the NPC sheet in this case. So that's really nice to have. And is, again, pretty standard with a lot of the Roll20 bundles and adventures. They'll include the handouts, but we also get, in addition to all that, all of these player art handouts, which usually just are interspersed in the rule book and depict various cool fantasy scenes. I don't think most of them are used in the context of this actual adventure, but they're just cool artwork you can use to show off. Or maybe you can look at that as inspiration, be like, oh yeah, I want to make build adventures around some of these scenes because they're really cool looking. And like I said, I do dig the art a lot. It's different. It feels different, and it feels different in a cool way. That's like, oh, it feels like Pathfinder. Like they've really made their own style with it. So I really dig it and appreciate it. So I guess we can jump ahead to the adventure. We can look at the character sheets too. I do think the character sheets are pretty impressive. Let's bring Belleros back here, which this is what the map looks like. And I actually gave him lighting. He does not normally emit light. So humans don't have dark vision. So this is what you would see by pressing Control L. Oops, let's pull that up better. There we go. This is what you see when you go down. So the adventure is, hey, there's something is stealing a fish, I think. We're at the basement of a fishery. Monsters probably in the basement, classic starter quest. But instead of just going down there and fighting a bunch of rats, actually we do fight rats at the very beginning, but it opens up into more things and descends into more and more danger, and really does a great job of ramping up the difficulty as you go. Now this is set up with dynamic lighting, which if you're new to Roll20, you have to be a paid subscriber to actually get this feature. Otherwise, you will just have to deal, or the GM can deal with Fog of War, which is just manually revealing rooms as you go along, and you won't be able to have this cool sight blocker information. But if you're playing in Roll20, I would very highly recommend it because it looks really cool, and this is kind of a dynamic version of being able to walk around. Although I would hesitate to see why they opened this up, because it's supposed to be you're barely seeing this, so I might draw the dynamic lighting a little bit tighter than that. You can see on the dynamic lighting layer where all that stuff goes. This also doesn't use the fancy new doors, which were added at some point to Roll20 after this release. So you'll have to update that, or don't, and just treat it like a normal sight blocker and just move those doors manually. But you come across a bunch of giant rats, you fight them, and you move off into just a really cool, small but well-paced dungeon crawl. And what I really love about this adventure particularly is it does a good job of teaching you the game as if you were playing like a video game, right? Like video games have done such a good job of tutorializing their games by having you jump right in and teaching you how to play through various methods, either characters telling you what to do, audio diaries, or just, as lame as just having pop-ups that explain, game systems to you. However they can do it. But what I really appreciated, yes, this obviously comes with all the rule books and all the information, which, as I mentioned, that is actually behind the adventure here in Roll20, that has just a huge, it covers skill checks and, how to run a session and how to attack people, how to do saving throws, the 3-action economy, which is a big deal in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which works beautifully and is very intuitive, I feel like, because different things, most things take 1 action, but maybe casting a spell might take 2 actions, and then combine with that with moving, which takes an action. How to do balance and creating, balanced encounters, and how many you should throw at the players, and how to deal out experience and treasures, and worry about the difficulty class for different skill checks the players have to make. Like, all of this information is in here and is very tightly packed into just the basic rules you need in order to run an adventure for the GMs. And then also for heroes, they have a really great player reference guide, which is just, imagine as like index. You're like, you're playing a board game and they come with like hey, here's all our icons and things you do on your turn and things you should know about, as a little pamphlet you hand to the players. For every game that they play. This is basically that. It just comes with a whole bunch of really handy information for covering movement, cover, and making all the most common checks that you'll have to make during the context of this dungeon crawl, and as well as information about the pre-generated characters specifically, and then how to level them up, and what happens, and all those new features. So honestly, a big thumbs up to how the rules are laid out. I thought it was very well done. It's not as exciting for me to go over that in the video because it's just a bunch of, sitting there reading and nodding along. But what I will mention is how well it tutorializes every step in every room that you go in. For example, the very first room has a bunch of giant rats, and it teaches you how to do combat. It mentions, hey, literally roll the d20, add this modifier against the giant rats, AC, and then when they attack you, and here's their initiative. You roll with perception, which is a bit jarring for those of us used to D&D 5e where it's dexterity based. Although you can also roll stealth with your initiative, which is interesting if you're kind of hiding along, which I do like that. How to deal with a slope, rolling athletics checks to crawl down things, or how to deal with tiptoeing around webbing, or else you upset this giant spider. And then if you upset the giant spider, then that involves an extra attack because it's got this, introduces saving throws because the giant spider can poison you. So now you have to worry about being like the sickened condition. And then you may have to worry about stealthing and dismantling this barricade quietly, or else these zombies come out. And guess what? The undead fight introduces damage resistance and immunities, in which is far different than how D&D works, where that one is just advantage and or that one's half damage or double damage or no damage. In this case, it's a number that has damage reduction, which might be like, hey, the skeletons only have 4 hit points, but if you do slashing damage to them, they automatically resist like 5 of that slashing damage. And that becomes a lot more tactically satisfying for the players to figure out those inherent weaknesses or strengths or exploits that they can use against certain creatures. And then there's like, a questionable liquid they can drink, which if they make a save, they can gain a bonus. There are these kobolds trying to break into a area with some treasure. There's a nice little puzzle that they have to work through involving coins. There's this cool like mini boss fight against kobolds that can throw traps down, as well as having these spears shoot out of there. That's all in just the first level, and it's 11 room dungeon. And then and each of these, one of them introduces traps, one of them introduces puzzles. Like, it just does a great job of checking off all the boxes and really making sure all of our 4 classes have fun things that they can do. And then level 2 is almost just as big and introduces even more advanced creatures. There's a nice cool like elemental section where they can gain the powers of these elemental orbs and fight this rat, which introduces persistent damage. And then the finale is against a bunch of a kobold boss with a pit trap in the middle that I'm sure players and creatures can utilize. And then it turns out the whole thing is the kobolds have recently hatched a green dragon and are stealing all this food to feed it. And then it becomes really kind of a weird optional thing where the players can choose whether they want to go in and actually fight this green dragon or not. And they should be level 2 before they do these last 2 boss fights. So you're only level 1 and 2 for the majority of this dungeon. And I gotta say, playing 5th edition, level 1 just sucks. It's just useless. It's worthless. You're so weak. You can't do hardly any of your things. And, you don't have a lot of hit points to work with or abilities. It feels like just a newbie, kind of training wheels level that a lot of D&D veterans, I feel like you just skip level 1 and maybe even sometimes level 2, so you can start with your subclass stuff already at 3rd level for most classes. Some of them do get it at 1st or 2nd level. Pathfinder, that's not the case. I feel like Pathfinder, just looking at the character sheets and looking at the abilities, I think you gain enough cool, unique features that that 1st level actually felt pretty good. I mean, the fighter at 1st level has 24 hit points, which is more akin to like a 2nd or 3rd level fighter at this point. So they actually do a pretty good job of making 1st level worth playing. And boy, this dungeon really shows off like all the things you could do at 1st level. And it does mention the fact that for easy purposes, you can basically always retreat and rest and then go back in the dungeon and keep trying. So there really isn't any kind of there's not a whole lot of danger implied there, and it's really just up to the resting. I mean, technically, you're supposed to rest every 24 hours, so as a GM, you could certainly limit that. But I want to make a particular shout out to how sexy this character sheet is. I have not seen the Roll20 Pathfinder character sheet, I guess, in a while. Like I have reviewed Pathfinder adventures previously on this channel and Starfinder adventures. I don't remember the sheets looking this good, so I don't know if this is either a second edition thing or if they just updated what the official Pathfinder sheets look like, but this is so good looking. It does a great job with the, first of all, just the color, like everything pops and looks, very nice, and you can see what all is, easily clickable. And it automatically puts all the things in, like the way that the weapon attacks work and everything just works so lovingly well. Now, I actually switched it, so first of all, it defaults to whispering to the GM. You can turn that off or on. And then it defaults to automatically rolling the damage and the critical damage. I turned that off as well to help to stop cluttering things. But those are both options you can check or uncheck. Instead, I use them as buttons. So, for example, Valeros here, who almost got a critical hit, or maybe he did, because the way crits work in Pathfinders, if you get 10 above the AC, it's an auto crit. That's really good, too. It lets you literally kick ass against weaker creatures. So that probably is going to critically hit any creature, in which case I could roll the critical damage instead of the normal damage. And you just click on the little hyperlink button and it automatically rolls it, which is really freaking awesome. It even includes, and if you want, in fact, if you want to do it without the attack, you can roll that one, which just includes the attack roll itself, and then you could roll damage separately by doing that and turn into a button. Or you can also even do because you could sit there and use 3 actions for your 3 attacks if you wanted to without moving or doing anything else, except you apply a penalty, and you can actually click these buttons and it'll automatically apply the -5 and then -10 penalties. Although if it's, I believe, versatile finesse, it's only -4, -8. But that's also a really cool feature. So you don't have to do any of those manual little adjustments, which is what turns me off of, especially playing Shadowrun for a while. And what I liked about 5e is 5e doesn't have those little incremental, except for like cover and kind of those things. But otherwise, it's all advantage, disadvantage. It takes away all the little minute modifiers. Pathfinder goes back to those modifiers, but it does such a good job of, making sure that in Roll20, you really don't have to fuck around with that too much, which I love. For example, flat-footed is a very common, debuff that you would inflict on people or on yourself. Basically, if you're caught being like flanked or whatever else, like you kind of tripped up, but it's a -2 to your AC. Now that can be tricky to keep track of, but watch what happens. Here's the AC right here when I actually click on this. Look at that. It automatically deducts my AC in the character sheet. How fucking cool is that? I love that. The way all these conditions automatically work for that. Like Sickened, I believe, is a global debuff modifier. And watch what happens when I add 1 to Sickened. Suddenly I have a -1 to all of my things, as long as I have this on there. And I can even click that to kind of remind myself and everybody what is going on with my character. Like, that is such a cool feature. I cannot get over how awesome that is. And there's initiative right there, which you can use for perception, or there's a drop down menu where you can change, what you're rolling for your perception. There's a reminder of what your actions are, and everything's on different tabs. So this includes any kind of just written background information you have, which I am disappointed that they didn't fill this in for our pre-generated characters. Any included feats, our inventory, spells, which obviously our fighter is not going to have any spells, and alchemy section, and finally the options, which you already saw. So I adore these character sheets. I think they look amazing. I don't know how new this is. Maybe this is me just finally catching up to what Pathfinder looks like in Roll20, but frankly, I think this character sheet is a million times better and more functional than the official 5e character sheet, to the point where I'm annoyed, like I've been missing out on how good a character sheet can be. Now, there is a big caveat here, and the caveat is that there is no character Manser support for Pathfinder 2nd edition, which sucks, because the character Manser is such a useful tool when playing D&D 5e or a selection of other RPGs where it's available, that really helps specifically building a new character, obviously, but also every time we level up. My party has been using character Manser for years, ever since it's been available. I hope it's been for years. I've been saying years. Ever since it's been available, really, to be able to level up. And it's just hugely helpful. It plugs all the things and it tells you what all you need to do, and it's right there. You just build it in your character sheet, and then you click a button, and then it just plops everything in there. Now, it's not perfect. Sometimes you might have some, homebrew things or extra effects that you have to drag in there, but for the most part, it works amazingly well. And this one does not have any kind of character Manser support, which is a bummer. So you have to do everything manually. That is a bummer, but I still just really, really love the way this character sheet looks. And I'll show you an example. This is the wizard character. for using the compendium to do a drag and drop. So this is our wizard Ezrin. You would go to the spells section. You would look up your spells, which I've already pulled up here. And the reason it says BB is because it's from the beginner box. And I've actually, by the way, turned mine off. I've got all of the things. And if you just select... So I wanted to show what you would see specifically, which is only the beginner box stuff. So if you only had the beginner box available and none of the other things like the rule book or any of the other support supplement books that Paizo has released over the years, you would only have this content to use from. But as you can see, this is just the spells. Pretty good amount of spells. This is just what's in the beginner box. So let's say I wanted to add see invisibility to my spells. You just literally click and drag it. And as you can see, it literally lights up certain sections. I'm going to put that under spells. And then it puts that under a spell and automatically says it, okay, it's a second level spell and it takes 2 actions to cast it. And then it becomes a clickable thing for me to roll instantly from there. So that part's really nice. That's what having the compendium will do for you, is be able to drag and drop anything. And I can do the same thing for weapons and items. Rules, obviously, you're not really dragging and dropping those. Although I think feats you can. I believe feats work the same and you can drag and drop feats onto here as well. So that helps, and you don't have to manually enter a lot of things. So hopefully you don't have to manually, you can. Obviously, you click this little plus button and manually create whatever stuff you want. But the less I have to do that, the more inclined I am to use it on Roll20, frankly. It does suck that it doesn't use the character monster. That's a big bummer for me, but this is just an amazing character sheet. Now, the NPC sheets look a little bit different. We can take let's see, what do we take? Maybe our kobold friends. I'm shift clicking them, by the way. You can click them, obviously, in here to open them up. You can also check them out. Whoops. On the token page, which Roll20, this also is a standard add whenever they give you a bundle, which is just all of these monsters put on a blank map that you can just see and drag from. Now, I can sit here and copy and paste one of these. I can literally click on my Kobold Warrior, Control Warrior, and Control C, and then go back to level 1, and then do a Control V, and then I can set him down. Or I can grab the Kobold Warrior from here, drag it like I do for my compendium, and that also spawns a Kobold Warrior. So there's multiple ways of doing this. And then the way the NPC sheet looks, I already showed you the handout that you can click. There's the kind of equivalent of their CR rating up there. You can choose to whisper rolls or not. There's their items, modifiers, which are basically used for their saving throws. You can click initiative here. It's not nearly as attractive as the player character sheet. You don't have the nice colors and easily clickable buttons. I guess the GM is just, doesn't have to stare at the sheets for too long, but basically trust that everything you see is essentially hyperlinked and clickable. And then when you actually want to make the attack, you could just click on one of these. And I do hate that it defaults to whisper. I also found a weird bug where I think it's supposed to not default to whisper unless this is clicked on like this. So now it will whisper. And now if I click it off and know it was off before, and now I click it, and now it's not whispered. So weirdly, it says it's not whispering, but the first time I seem to open each sheet, it does whisper until I click it on and off again, and then it won't whisper it. Now, I'm somebody who vastly prefers to put everything in public roles, and I think a lot of people who play on virtual tabletops are the same. You prefer to use those public roles. So I would definitely make sure it's not whispering, because my players at least would be very annoyed about that. It also doesn't include all the sexy little tricks you can use with Roll20. So for example, I could add a double bracket to this 1d4, which is their sneak attack. And now whenever I click it, look at that, it auto rolls it in the window, so I don't have to actually manually roll the 1d4. It would have been nice if they had done that, but again, I don't know how old this is relatively to when they've started doing these little hints and tips. And maybe that's just part of like, hey, know your Roll20 stuff and you can get the most out of it. But given that this is a beginner box that's going to be aimed at a lot of newcomers and possibly newcomers to Roll20, it would have been nice to include those kind of tricks throughout here. I think that's the main one, though, is being able to quickly roll the dice for all these features. I just love how this looks, though. I will mention I'd prefer if it hid the damage numbers first, and I think I didn't figure out a way to do that. You could do the critical damage to where it's a button, but I believe, and then, yeah, there's the whisper rolls. Show notes and rolls is probably good to have in case you write something in the notes. It's like, hey, remember to add this, effect. But in terms of not adding the bonus damage, I don't know if it'll do that for me. So it might always roll the damage, which is a little bit annoying. just because there were options before. If you recall, the player characters had an option where they could roll both the attack and damage, or just the damage, and had more options there. The NPC sheet is not nearly as flexible or sexy as what the players can do, but I guess it does get the job done in the end. All right, this has already been about half an hour, so why don't we go over my pros and cons to the Pathfinder beginner box. Pros: the tutorial adventure teaches the game while you play. It does such a good job of this that while you're reading the adventure, I was actually astonished. While reading the adventure, it has a good excuse of why everything is there and how to teach the players how to do everything. You know, when it comes to all the stuff that they're probably wanting to do, which is a dungeon crawl. And I think, you know, D&D and Pathfinder both are best suited for the dungeon crawl. They're both designed perfectly for that, and that is the best way to teach the players, you know, with this enclosed space where they still feel like they've got some options and they've got, you know, agency enough to explore on their own, but yet the GM has, you know, hey, here's the one area you're going to be at, so I've got all these scripted things set up. That's obviously where Roll20 really shines, because now I don't have to come up with other maps or things. I can just have everything ready to go with the tokens. Dynamic lighting is already set up and all that, but it just does a fantastic job of giving you all of those various tools and things to interact with the game and making sure you and the players can learn it together, which I think is absolutely fantastic for a beginner box specifically. Pro: Menace Under Otari is a tightly balanced, fun dungeon crawl. So not only is it a good newbie teacher dungeon, it's just a fun dungeon. I would definitely run this as a dungeon crawl. It's just a classic kobold dungeon, but it's got other things in there. It's got some undead, it's got some beasts, it's got some puzzles. You know, it's got the monster, the big dragon at the end. You know, it's a wormling, but still, like, you know, for a level 1 dungeon crawl, like, it really shows off what you can do at level 1 for Pathfinder. Pro: the beginner box includes dozens of extra monsters, which is also very surprising because unlike the 5e beginner box, which only comes with the monsters in those adventures, although it's a bigger adventure, there's more monsters, this one includes a lot of extra monsters that are not in the adventure, but that you can just use, you know, here in this adventure, or presumably, I assume they've been added to the compendium. I guess we could check on that. Again, to load it, and this should be only monsters from the beginner box. Roll20 tries to find my monsters. I will also say my other pro is that the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Roll20 character sheets are highly attractive, or very attractive and highly flexible. I think they do just, I've been gushing enough about those character sheets, but they look amazing. Specifically the player sheets. The NPC sheets aren't nearly as cool looking or as functional, but the player character sheets, just for somebody who's been staring a lot at the 5e player character sheets, and some of you players have obviously on Roll20, like, I think Pathfinder 2nd Edition kicks its ass just up and down the battlefield. Okay, here we go. So here's all the monsters. So these are in the compendium. I think these are the 50 monsters that you just saw in the journal, but having them in the compendium means I can create a whole new game if I wanted to, and just grab these and throw, you know, whatever I wanted onto the map. And notice how when I grab it, it's actually going to generate a character sheet for me as a pop-up, because it's going to think, oh, you don't have this thing, I'm going to grab it on there. Boy, that thing's big. That's a giant skeleton. And then it's going to populate a new one on the top, because it's going to assume I don't already have it, which I did on that one. However, I do have some cons. Con: the Menace Under Otari adventure is relatively short. Disappointingly short. It's just one big dungeon crawl. Now, I love the dungeon. I think it's a great dungeon. I got no complaints about how this dungeon is designed, laid out, and how it teaches you the stuff, but I wanted more, because there's no opportunities for role-playing or socializing in this dungeon. Zero. And there's no opportunity for just exploring the topside world or going on different quests or anything else. It's just the one quest and the one dungeon crawl, and I think especially when compared to the 5e equivalents of those starter sets, like, those offer way more content and adventure. And, you know, unfortunately for Pathfinder, Lost Mine of Fendelver in particular is considered still one of the best starter adventures you can run, clearly for D&D, but also if this is the equivalent for Pathfinder, like, sorry, but 5e beats you on that with its included adventure. I will say there is a sequel called, I believe, Troubles in Otari or something like that is also available on Roll20 and obviously Paizo's website, which gets players up to 4th level and is kind of an anthology which includes multiple adventures. That sounds great, but it's sold separately, and I would have vastly preferred if that was included in this beginner box. Another con is that Pathfinder 2nd Edition lacks character monster support, obviously a specific con to the Roll20 version, but that is a big bummer. that I've been relying on the character monster quite a bit. I think it's super helpful when it comes to building characters, and especially helpful for new players or players who aren't too invested in all the little minor changes and additions they have to make, and they can just trust the system by inputting a few things that it builds their character sheet, and especially be useful for the purposes of this beginner box. So not having the character monster available really sucks. Hopefully we'll get there at some point. And the other con, something I actually haven't mentioned yet in this review, is it only includes 4 pre-generated characters, which unfortunately means it also loses out to D&D's starter sets, which all, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they all include 5 player characters, if not maybe 6. I'm pretty sure they include 5 of the player characters. Now, you know, obviously if you have 4 less players, this doesn't matter to you. It doesn't matter. I have ran with 5 players for most of my D&Ding career, I guess, and it sucks if you've got that big of a group and you look in there and you all want to pass out character sheets, give to all these players, and there's only 4 people in here. Like, it wouldn't have been that much work to give us 1 more. I'm sure there's another basic class we could have thrown in there to help out. Like, it's or just even give us a second fighter of a different, you know, race and background and stuff, which I'm pretty sure is what D&D did with the starter set. So that is kind of a bummer. All right, final verdict. Though the included adventure is woefully short, Menace Under Otari is an excellently designed dungeon crawl that shows off what Pathfinder 2nd Edition has to offer, and the beginner box does a fantastic job teaching the game to incoming players and game masters. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and you can support my work at patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, William, Brandon, Genocider, David, Eclectic, Roleplayer, Roll, Christopher, Brian, William, David, Corey, Koa1337, Matthew, Big Nut, John, and Furnace, Chris, Scott, and Gene. And gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcus, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Lumpy's Buds, Jerome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, Scott, Refus, Carolyn, William. Thank you all very much for your support.